Brothers and sisters, have you ever stopped to consider that every song you sing, every melody you hum, is not just sound? That music is a language of the Spirit, an invisible force that shapes your heart, your mind, and even your destiny. Yes, music carries power. It can invite the presence of God or give ground to the enemy. Today, we are going to uncover a truth that most people ignore. There are popular songs that make the devil rejoice every time you sing them. Songs that glorify pain, pride, or lust are not harmless. They are weapons in the spiritual realm, and without realizing it, millions of people are handing the enemy victory with their own lips. By the end of this message, you will never listen to music the same way again, because you will understand how your voice can either release heaven or empower darkness. Music was never meant to be ordinary. It was never just vibration in the air or entertainment for the flesh. It was born in the heart of God as a bridge between heaven and earth. Every note, every rhythm, every sound carries something invisible, an atmosphere, spirit, a message. When the angels sang before the throne, their voices carried glory. When David strummed his harp in the wilderness, demons fled from Saul. That is because music is spiritual currency. It can purchase peace or chaos depending on who directs it. You may not see it with your eyes, but the moment a melody fills the air, something begins to move in the unseen realm. The heart of the listener begins to open. The soul becomes tender, and the spirit becomes receptive to whatever that song carries. This is why heaven uses music to lift us higher, and why hell uses it to pull us lower. Many do not understand this truth. They think music is neutral, that it has no consequence beyond sound. But music has always been a vehicle of influence. It can invite angels or stir up demons. When you sing a song filled with despair, fear, or rebellion, you are not just entertaining yourself. You are aligning your emotions with the message of that song. That alignment creates atmosphere, draws presence. Heaven's songs draw heaven's presence. Worldly songs draw the world's presence. And some songs, those drenched in lust, pride, or blasphemy, draw the attention of hell itself. You must recognize that the spiritual realm is always listening. The words you speak, the melodies you embrace, they do not vanish into silence. They rise as offerings. Every lyric is an altar. Every tune is an invitation. When your heart joins in agreement with something dark, even unknowingly, that agreement gives it access. The enemy does not always need your rebellion. Sometimes he just needs your repetition. When you sing what he loves, you give him ground. You might think it's harmless because it's a song, but the spirit behind that song rejoices, because through your voice, his message is carried further. That is why the believer must be discerning about what they let fill their ears and flow from their lips. The devil does not need you to worship him openly. He only needs you to echo the lyrics that glorify the flesh. He knows that music bypasses logic and goes straight to the soul. It reaches the heart faster than any sermon. One song can shape a generation more than 1,000 sermons can correct it. And when that song is saturated with the wrong spirit, it builds a stronghold that is hard to break. The world may call it art, but heaven calls it warfare. The sound you agree with determines the spirit that rests upon you. Not every popular song comes from heaven's inspiration. Popularity is not proof of purity. Just because the world celebrates it does not mean heaven approves it. There are songs that carry pain wrapped in beauty, rebellion wrapped in rhythm, and darkness disguised as freedom. The enemy is subtle. He hides poison in melodies so sweet that your soul drinks it before your mind even notices. You start repeating those lyrics, and soon what you sing becomes what you feel. What you feel becomes what you believe, and what you believe becomes the atmosphere of your life. There are songs that glorify heartbreak instead of healing, pride instead of humility, lust instead of love, anger instead of peace. They may sound powerful, but they weaken your spirit. They make the devil rejoice because every time you sing them, you magnify the wounds he caused instead of the victory Christ won. Some songs make your heart heavy without you realizing it. You finish listening and feel restless, drained, or bitter. That is not coincidence. It is spiritual transfer. The melody carried a message, and the message carried a spirit. So when heaven listens to the earth, it hears two types of sound. The sound that exalts God and the sound that exalts man. The sound that ushers in glory and the sound that invites darkness. When the people of God sing songs filled with holiness, joy, and thanksgiving, heaven leans close. Angels join the chorus. Chains begin to break because praise shifts atmospheres. But when the world lifts its voice in songs that mock purity and celebrate sin, hell begins to dance. Every lyric that glorifies darkness becomes a celebration of rebellion against the Creator. And though many do not see it, those songs open doors that give the enemy legal access to minds and hearts. That is why discernment is not optional. The believer must guard their ears the same way they guard their hearts. You cannot expect peace while singing chaos. You cannot walk in freedom while rehearsing bondage. The enemy is strategic. He uses repetition to normalize corruption. The more you hear it, the more you accept it. The more you sing it, the more you agree with it. And before long, the soul becomes numb to holiness and sensitive only to noise. But when a person awakens to the truth that music is spiritual, everything changes. They begin to listen not just with their ears, but with their spirit. They can feel when a song carries light and when it carries darkness. They sense when heaven moves and when hell stirs. And in that moment of awareness, they make a choice to silence the sound that empowers the enemy and amplify the sound that glorifies God. The enemy has always known the influence of sound. Long before humanity discovered rhythm, harmony, or lyrics, he understood the power that music holds. He was once the anointed guardian of worship, adorned with instruments built into his very being. Every note that flowed from him was designed to glorify the Creator. But pride corrupted that purpose, and what was once holy became twisted. Now he still uses that same gift, not to worship God, but to distract man. His strategy has not changed, only his instruments have. Where once he sang in heaven's courts, now he whispers through the world's songs. Where he once lifted up glory to God, now he fills the air with melodies that glorify sin, self, and sorrow. The enemy does not come to destroy music. He comes to redefine it. He changes its direction and drains its holiness. He turns something divine into a doorway for deception. Through music, he spreads messages faster than any preacher can correct them. A 3-minute song can normalize what Scripture condemns. A catchy lyric can make rebellion feel beautiful and sin sound poetic. And because music bypasses the intellect and goes straight to the heart, its influence is almost invisible. You don't analyze a song, you feel it. And that feeling becomes a belief before you even realize it. He uses the rhythm to distract and the words to plant seeds. The more a person repeats the song, the deeper the seed grows. The melody becomes the soil, and the repetition waters it until it bears fruit. Fruit that looks like pride, lust, anger, or depression. That's why so many people sing about heartbreak and then wonder why they cannot find healing. They sing about loneliness and wonder why their spirit feels isolated. They echo the lyrics of darkness and wonder why they can't find light. It is not just emotion, it's spiritual alignment. The tongue has power, and when the tongue sings lies, the heart begins to live them. The enemy's greatest deception is to make people believe that music is harmless. He hides behind art, behind fame, behind trends. He convinces people that lyrics don't matter, that rhythm is just rhythm, that entertainment is just entertainment. But he knows that what enters through the ear does not stay in the ear. It enters the soul. That's why he invests in music more than in anything else. Because when the sound of rebellion fills the earth, it creates an atmosphere where sin feels normal and holiness feels strange. He does not need to make you bow to him. He just needs you to hum his tune. Every time you repeat a lyric that glorifies the flesh, every time you chant words that celebrate sin, you become a vessel carrying his message further. And while the world may call it just a song, in the spiritual realm, it's an altar of worship built to the wrong spirit. Music was designed to lift man toward God, but the enemy twists it to pull man toward himself. And that is why words matter. The power is not only in the sound, but in the message behind the sound. Words are seeds. When you sing lyrics that exalt pride, you plant pride in your spirit. When you declare through song that love is pain or that life is hopeless, those words begin to shape your emotions and your worldview. The human heart is a sponge. It absorbs what it hears most. So when it hears darkness dressed as beauty, it begins to crave what destroys it. This is why many of the world's most popular songs seem harmless but are spiritually poisonous. They glorify heartbreak until people start believing that suffering is the definition of love. They celebrate arrogance and call it confidence. They mock purity and call it freedom. They elevate human desire above divine purpose, and the world sings along as if it were truth. Every time those lyrics are sung, they reinforce the enemy's philosophy that life without God is enough, that self is supreme, that sin is simply art. What begins as a catchy beat becomes a doctrine. It teaches without a pulpit. It disciples without scripture. It molds character without confrontation. And because it's enjoyable, people don't resist it. They welcome it. They dance to their own deception. They rehearse the words of bondage and call it expression. Yet all the while, something deep within their spirit begins to fade. The sensitivity to holiness weakens. The hunger for purity diminishes. The atmosphere of worship becomes strange to them because their hearts have been tuned to another frequency. The words in songs carry energy, either life or death. The book of Proverbs says that life and death are in the power of the tongue. When the tongue sings of lust, it breathes death into desire. When it sings of rebellion, it breathes death into obedience. When it glorifies emptiness, it breathes death into hope. Every lyric is a proclamation, and every proclamation shapes a destiny. If the words exalt sin, then sin multiplies. If the words exalt God, then glory fills the atmosphere. So the question is not whether you like the song. The question is, what spirit does it serve? Because every song serves something. Every lyric belongs to a kingdom. Every melody is either a throne for light or a pathway for darkness. The enemy uses the language of music to bypass your defenses and capture your agreement. Once he has your agreement, he doesn't need your worship. He already owns your sound. And that's why discernment is not about musical taste. It's about spiritual awareness. It's about understanding that words shape worlds. If a song glorifies pain, you begin to live in that pain. If it glorifies selfishness, you become less sensitive to love. If it glorifies chaos, you start feeling restless even when life is calm. Words in songs are not entertainment. They are enchantment. They either awaken heaven inside you or awaken hell around you. The believer must understand that what fills the ear affects the heart and shapes the soul. Every song you listen to, every lyric you repeat, and every melody you hum carries spiritual weight. The music that you allow into your life does not simply entertain. It educates, molds, and aligns your spirit with the kingdom. That is why songs that glorify pain, lust, pride, or rebellion are not harmless. They are carriers of a spirit that the enemy has designed to influence thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. When you listen without discernment, you are not neutral. You are agreeing with the message contained within the music. That agreement may seem subtle at first, almost invisible, but over time it becomes a pattern, a stronghold in the soul. Music communicates with the spirit, bypassing the intellect. You might understand the words intellectually, but your spirit absorbs them in ways that are deeper than comprehension. This is why the enemy chooses music as one of his most effective tools. A song can awaken desire, stir unrest, or create longing for what is forbidden. A melody can soothe the conscience while simultaneously normalizing sin. One repeated chorus can teach your spirit to celebrate darkness and embrace attitudes contrary to God's will. The enemy does not need you to sin openly when he can quietly shape your desires through the words you sing. Many popular songs are traps because they are cloaked in beauty. They may sound inspiring, romantic, or emotional, but underneath the surface, they glorify self, rebellion, or pain. People listen repeatedly, thinking the song is harmless or relatable, but the repetition is reinforcing the enemy's agenda. Music has the power to condition the mind and the heart, creating spiritual patterns that are difficult to reverse. It is subtle, often going unnoticed, but it has a cumulative effect. The more you sing it, the more you align yourself with its spirit, whether you realize it or not. The words you speak in song are not just words. They are declarations. They shape the way you see the world, yourself, and God. When a song glorifies heartbreak, your heart begins to embrace hopelessness. When it glorifies lust or pride, your soul begins to desire things contrary to God's principles. The repetition of these lyrics creates an atmosphere in your spirit that is favorable to the enemy's kingdom. The songs that seem harmless or even enjoyable can carry subtle chains that bind the soul, creating an invisible captivity that is reinforced every time the song is heard or sung. True worship has a different effect. When your voice joins with songs that honor God, your spirit is lifted, your mind is renewed, and the atmosphere around you changes. Praise releases the presence of God and drives out the influence of darkness. The believer who chooses carefully what to sing is not only protecting their own spirit, but also contributing to an environment where heaven's power can move freely. Worship is not entertainment, it is warfare. Every alleluia weakens the enemy's hold. Every declaration of God's goodness strengthens the spirit, opens doors to divine intervention, and aligns the believer with heaven's purposes. The enemy understands the subtlety of repetition. Music repeated in the heart and mind has a profound effect on spiritual alignment. A song that glorifies bitterness may make the listener unknowingly bitter. A song that glorifies anger may make the listener more impatient, reactive, or critical. The energy behind the music communicates to the soul and teaches the listener to resonate with it. In contrast, songs of praise, thanksgiving, and faith teach the spirit to resonate with God's presence and principles. The alignment of the heart with the sound determines whether the song becomes a tool for darkness or a weapon of light. The danger lies not only in the overt messages of sin, but in the subtle glorification of the flesh. Lyrics that celebrate selfishness, rebellion, or worldly pleasures condition the heart to accept what is contrary to God's will. Over time, these messages shape the listener's desires, priorities, and choices. The average person may not notice the spiritual effect immediately, but repeated exposure builds a foundation that the enemy can exploit. Music becomes a form of indoctrination, quietly teaching the listener to normalize behaviors and attitudes that are destructive to their spiritual life. Believers must be intentional in guarding what they allow into their hearts. This requires discernment, prayer, and awareness. Not every popular song aligns with God's principles, and not every catchy tune is spiritually safe. Music that glorifies sin, despair, or rebellion is a pathway for the enemy to influence the heart. On the other hand, music that exalts God, celebrates His goodness, and affirms His truth strengthens faith, renews the mind, and creates an environment where God's power can operate. The spiritual impact of music extends beyond individual experience. When a community or generation sings songs that honor God, the atmosphere is saturated with His presence. Conversely, when society celebrates music that glorifies rebellion or sin, the atmosphere becomes conducive to darkness. This is why the enemy invests so heavily in shaping the music industry. Every lyric, every beat, every melody has potential spiritual consequences, shaping culture and influencing the collective conscience. A believer who understands the spiritual nature of music makes conscious choices. They examine the lyrics, discern the spirit behind the music, and choose what aligns with God's will. They understand that repetition reinforces spiritual alignment and that their voice carries power. What they sing can either strengthen their faith and create freedom, or it can give ground to the enemy and reinforce bondage. The decision is not trivial, it is spiritual strategy. By choosing songs that honor God and reject what glorifies darkness, the believer actively participates in the battle between heaven and hell, allowing their spirit to resonate with life, victory, and divine purpose. The power of music in the believer's life cannot be overstated. Music is not merely entertainment or background noise. It is a language of the Spirit. It communicates beyond words, reaching the heart and soul in ways that logic and reason often cannot. Every song carries energy, intention, and atmosphere, whether positive or negative. When the enemy wants to influence the world, he does not always use force. He uses melody. He uses lyrics, rhythm, and repetition to shape thoughts, stir emotions, and align hearts with his purposes. Every word sung, every note repeated, is either an invitation to light or to darkness. Many believers do not recognize the subtlety of this influence. They assume that music is neutral, that lyrics are harmless if they sound good or resonate emotionally. But the spiritual realm does not operate on popularity or aesthetic appeal. It operates on alignment. When a song glorifies fear, lust, pride, or pain, it aligns the listener's spirit with those very elements. The enemy knows that repeated exposure can create patterns in the soul, conditioning reactions, thoughts, and desires. Music is a conveyor of spiritual reality. It communicates truth or deception, whether the listener consciously acknowledges it or not. The enemy exploits this reality by embedding his messages in seemingly harmless songs. Songs that glorify sadness, anger, rebellion, or human desire may appear innocuous, even uplifting to some. Yet underneath the rhythm and melody, they carry a spirit that celebrates what God does not. When these songs are sung repeatedly, the soul begins to absorb their message. Over time, the heart resonates with darkness, the mind accepts distorted truths, and the spirit grows desensitized to holiness. The repetition of lyrics is a subtle yet powerful form of indoctrination that the enemy has perfected. Lyrics are not just entertainment, they are declarations. What is spoken, even in song, shapes the world around us. When a song glorifies despair, the listener begins to see despair as normal, even inevitable. When it glorifies pride, arrogance begins to feel acceptable. When it glorifies lust, the heart becomes vulnerable to temptation. Music is a spiritual mirror. It reflects and reinforces the reality that the listener has agreed to internally. Even if the agreement is unconscious, the spiritual impact is real. Every repeated lyric leaves a mark on the soul. True worship, on the other hand, operates with the opposite effect. When believers sing songs that honor God, their hearts are aligned with heaven, and the atmosphere around them shifts. Praise carries power. Every declaration of God's goodness, every hallelujah, and every expression of thanksgiving is a spiritual weapon. Worship is not passive. It is active engagement in the spiritual realm. As believers lift their voices in song, they release the presence of God into their environment, displacing darkness and bringing breakthrough. Music that glorifies God heals, strengthens, and empowers because it carries the authority of heaven with it. The danger lies not only in songs that overtly celebrate sin, but also in those that subtly glorify human weakness or suffering. Melodies that romanticize pain, heartbreak, or moral compromise condition the heart to accept these states as normal or desirable. The more these songs are repeated, the more the listener's spirit resonates with their message. Over time, what was once entertainment becomes agreement, and agreement becomes a foothold for the enemy in the believer's life. Spiritual discernment is required to recognize the difference between a song that uplifts and one that undermines faith. Believers must be intentional about the music they consume and the songs they sing. Music is not a neutral experience, it is spiritual training. Each lyric, each note, each chorus has the potential to shape character, influence decisions, and align the soul with either God's kingdom or the enemy's. Discernment is not about rejecting joy or rhythm. It is about choosing alignment with heaven rather than participating in patterns that reinforce darkness. When the believer understands this principle, they recognize that their voice is not merely a tool for expression, but a weapon in spiritual warfare. The repetition of lyrics is particularly significant. Words repeated in song have the power to shape habits of thought and feeling. When believers repeatedly sing praise, thanksgiving, and affirmation of God's promises, their spirits become attuned to heaven's reality. Conversely, when they repeatedly sing lyrics that glorify rebellion, sorrow, or immorality, their spirits begin to resonate with the enemy's reality. Music conditions the heart to accept the nature of the song, and this conditioning is cumulative. The choice of what to sing is therefore a strategic spiritual decision, not a trivial one. Community and culture are also affected by music. When a generation sings songs that honor God, the collective atmosphere becomes charged with His presence. Breakthrough, transformation, and divine intervention are more likely to manifest. Conversely, when society embraces music that glorifies sin or despair, the atmosphere becomes fertile for darkness, disobedience, and spiritual confusion. Music shapes not only individuals but entire communities, influencing attitudes, beliefs, and behavior on a large scale. The songs a culture repeats are a reflection of its spiritual alignment. Believers who are aware of these truths make deliberate choices about their music. They evaluate lyrics, discern the spirit behind melodies, and reject what glorifies darkness. They understand that repetition reinforces spiritual alignment, and that every song sung either strengthens faith and freedom or gives ground to the enemy. Music becomes a tool of intentional spiritual formation, shaping character, renewing the mind, and creating an environment conducive to God's presence. By choosing songs wisely, believers participate actively in spiritual warfare, allowing their voices to be instruments of life, victory, and divine purpose. The voice of a believer carries more power than most realize. Every word spoken, every melody repeated, and every song sung carries energy that shapes the unseen spiritual realm. Music is not neutral, it is a conveyor of atmosphere, a declaration of alignment, and a force that either invites heaven or empowers darkness. The enemy understands this principle better than many do. He has long recognized that songs can bypass logic and intellect, reaching directly into the heart, influencing emotions, shaping desires, and aligning spirits. That is why the songs a person repeats are so significant. They are not merely entertainment, but spiritual statements that reflect and shape the soul's allegiance. The lyrics of songs communicate messages to the spirit. They carry intent, purpose, and authority. When a song glorifies sorrow, pain, rebellion, or lust, the listener's heart begins to internalize those messages. Repetition reinforces this internalization. Each chorus sung, each verse hummed, each melody echoed becomes a declaration that the listener is agreeing with the principles embedded in that song. The power of repetition cannot be underestimated. It conditions the mind and heart to accept certain realities as normal, desirable, or inevitable. The enemy exploits this principle masterfully, using music as a tool to influence millions, shaping cultural attitudes, personal behavior, and spiritual sensitivity. Many popular songs are subtle in their influence. They do not appear to be dangerous because they are wrapped in beauty, emotion, or artistry. A song may celebrate heartbreak, romanticize pride, or normalize rebellion, and the listener may not realize the spiritual consequence. Over time, these melodies condition the heart, making the soul receptive to the very spirit that the enemy desires. The lyrics, though pleasant to the ear, are like seeds planted in the soil of the heart. They grow invisibly, shaping thought patterns, emotional responses, and moral perspectives. The music that is embraced repeatedly becomes a lens through which the listener interprets life, relationships, and their own identity. It is not only overtly sinful songs that carry danger. Even songs that dwell on human weakness, emotional pain, or self-centered perspectives can subtly reinforce the enemy's agenda. Songs that glorify despair or focus excessively on loss or heartbreak plant seeds of hopelessness. Songs that romanticize lust or self-indulgence encourage receptivity to temptation. Songs that glorify pride or arrogance reinforce attitudes contrary to humility and obedience. The impact is cumulative, shaping character, influencing choices, and conditioning the heart to resonate with a reality opposite to what God intends for His children. Believers must recognize the spiritual weight of what they sing and hear. Music is a tool for either life or death. Every lyric repeated, every chorus echoed carries authority in the spiritual realm. When believers sing songs of praise, thanksgiving, and worship, they create an atmosphere where heaven moves, chains break, and breakthroughs manifest. Conversely, when believers participate in songs that glorify the flesh, the enemy gains foothold and darkness is reinforced. The spiritual consequences of music are real, immediate, and long-lasting. They affect not only the individual, but also the environment around them. Repetition is central to the spiritual impact of music. When a believer sings words of victory, faith, and God's greatness repeatedly, those words become ingrained in the heart and mind. They transform thinking, strengthen faith, and prepare the spirit to receive miracles. The believer's life begins to align with the truths expressed in worship. On the other hand, repetition of lyrics that glorify sin, pain, or despair normalizes those conditions. It desensitizes the soul to holiness, reduces sensitivity to the spirit, and opens doors to influences that would otherwise have no access. Music shapes identity and destiny more than many realize. Because the tongue speaks, the heart agrees, and the spirit aligns. Community and culture are also affected by the music that is embraced. A generation that sings songs honoring God experiences a collective atmosphere charged with divine presence. Healing, transformation, and revival become more likely to manifest. Conversely, a society that celebrates music glorifying sin, pain, or rebellion develops a collective environment receptive to darkness. The repeated sound of a culture is a reflection of its spiritual alignment. Music shapes values, behavior, and collective thought. It molds character and attitudes on a mass scale, reinforcing either godliness or ungodliness depending on the lyrics embraced and repeated. Believers must exercise discernment and intentionality in choosing the songs they sing and listen to. Music is not a trivial choice. It is a strategic spiritual decision. Not every song that is popular, emotional, or enjoyable is spiritually safe. Discernment involves examining lyrics, understanding the spirit behind melodies, and rejecting those that glorify darkness or the flesh. Repetition is powerful, and the spiritual alignment reinforced by repeated singing or listening has long-term consequences. Choosing music wisely strengthens faith, aligns the soul with heaven, and positions the believer for breakthrough. It is a form of spiritual strategy, a way to actively participate in the battle between light and darkness. The tongue has power, and every melody carried by the tongue is a proclamation. Words spoken in song are not neutral, they shape realities and open doors. Praise and worship declare allegiance to God and invite His presence, while lyrics glorifying the flesh or rebellion grant ground to the enemy. Believers must understand that music communicates with the spirit before the intellect, bypassing conscious reasoning. Now, what is repeated becomes agreement, and agreement becomes alignment. By carefully choosing the songs they embrace, believers can control the spiritual atmosphere around them and within them, inviting life, freedom, and victory rather than bondage and defeat. The believer's responsibility is not passive. It requires vigilance, prayer, and awareness. Spiritual discernment must guide the music embraced. Songs of praise, worship, thanksgiving, and affirmation of God's truth become weapons in spiritual warfare, releasing power, breaking chains, and drawing heaven closer. Songs that glorify sin, despair, or the flesh become strongholds for the enemy, shaping character and influencing choices. Music is a force that can either advance God's kingdom or reinforce the enemy's agenda. Believers must recognize the authority in their voice, the power of repetition, and the invisible influence carried by melody. By intentionally choosing songs aligned with God's will, they become active participants in spiritual warfare, their voices instruments of life, victory, and divine purpose. Understanding the spiritual dimension of music transforms the believer's approach to worship and listening. It moves music from being mere entertainment to being a powerful tool of alignment. Each song is a declaration, each chorus an altar, and each melody an opportunity to release heaven or give ground to the enemy. Discernment allows the believer to recognize the difference between sound that invites God's presence and sound that empowers darkness. Awareness, combined with intentionality, ensures that the music embraced strengthens the spirit, cultivates faith, and creates an environment in which God's power can manifest. Music becomes not just art but strategy, not just enjoyment but engagement in the spiritual battle, shaping the believer's life and influencing the unseen realm in ways that last far beyond the duration of the song. Beloved, let us never underestimate the power of music. Every lyric repeated, every chorus echoed, every melody embraced carries energy and authority. Music is not neutral. It is either a pathway to heaven or a door for the enemy. The songs we sing shape our hearts, influence our emotions, condition our desires, and create the spiritual atmosphere around us. Songs that glorify sin, despair, or rebellion give ground to darkness, while songs of praise, worship, and thanksgiving release heaven's power. Repetition strengthens alignment. Discernment protects the soul. Intentional worship invites God's presence and breaks chains. Your voice is a weapon. Your choice of music is a spiritual strategy. Sing carefully, sing intentionally, and let every song you sing glorify God, uplift your spirit, and silence the enemy. The time has come to stop giving the devil reason to rejoice and start declaring victory, freedom, and glory with every note, every word, and every melody. Remember, what you sing is what you release. Choose wisely. Sing for heaven, not for the enemy. Let your voice be a weapon, your song a declaration, and your life a testimony of victory.